I got the chat over there as well. So, and we're live. Oh, and Rohan slips away.
Sorry, I just had to close the door quickly.
No problem, no problem. Not at all. Hi there, how are you?
Good in yourself, Jim.
Really good actually. Friday
Good.
already, weekend around the
So,
corner.
yeah.
Welcome to
The
all
week's flown
viewers.
by.
Sorry?
The week has flown by.
The week has flown by. Yeah, well,
But weekends are always for some nice riding, so looking forward to that.
yeah, well, but in that regards, you won a race last weekend, right?
Uh, that's correct, yes, on Sunday.
On Sunday. Can you tell a little bit more about it? I mean, this wasn't like an average Sunday, right?
No, so it's one of the bigger races we have in South Africa. So we have considered to have like three big classics throughout the year. And yes, last Sunday was one of them. A little bit of downtime for me with illness earlier in the year, but yeah, got back, and then as soon as I started riding, this was one of my goals to try win this race, because it's something I've been wanting to win ever since I was junior, and I've come second a couple of years ago, and finally last week Sunday I managed to get the victory.
Really cool. That's great, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of like it's a bit strange because over here, we are preparing for like winter time, so the season is kind of over. But at your
Yeah.
place, it's like it's actually starting right now, right?
Yes, so it basically started again in September or so, because our seasons are different to yours.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, so now we have quite a few criteriums in the last few weeks, months. But yeah, it's about a month or so left
Yep.
for our racing season, and then December's and January's are a bit less busy because of it's mostly a holiday season
Ah,
for us
okay.
in South Africa
Yeah.
during that time.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
Well, I think for this, like, this is our third edition of this Q&A. Again, we are going to try to answer as many questions as possible.
Of course.
I think especially now, well, for the northern hemisphere, it's important also to handle some like indoor questions or goal setting already for next season, which might be kind of strange for you, but yeah, over here it's
something from the support side. It's definitely two questions I've been having more recently in the last month or so. When your season ended, then people are already motivated to
Yep.
set a training program for maybe Liège, Bastogne-Liège for next year, or whatever, maybe a cycling holiday in the summer.
Sure.
So I think those two topics are very popular at this moment.
Yeah, yeah. Well, let's dive into it and let's try to answer as many questions as possible. Would you like to kick off? Would you like me to
Yes.
pick one, or maybe we just start at the top?
Yeah, I'll just start at the top with NL Fuzzy, asking about how he should set his availability for a commute to work and back. And yeah, he's referring to a busy area of around 5 kilometers with where you can't ride at high speed. So normally, what I would suggest is with users that commute daily or quite often, is to set their availability for an hour, and then that way they can either do their structured training session or the planned training session in the morning
Yeah.
or in the afternoon. It just depends on which way works best for you. With regards to the 5 kilometer high speed section, where you're not allowed to, or you can't ride at high speed.
Yeah.
Is I would suggest you try work around that. You obviously, it would be unsafe to do intervals during the session. So perhaps do it on your way back home when you are past the 5 kilometer unsafe section, or you just delay your block of interval sessions that you might have for that time.
Yeah.
Either way, back or forward.
Yeah, I get it.
Most devices like Garmin or Wahoo, it's possible to pause your workout or your interval session so that you can maybe just resume it once you are ready to do it in a safe space.
Yeah. Well, I would like to add like our workouts are basically always structured like the more intense intervals are in the middle. And that's due to the idea that we don't know beforehand, like whether you have a headwind first or a tailwind. But you can play a little bit with that. You know, that the fact of the matter that they are right in the middle of the workout means that, yeah, you would like to do a proper warm up and some cooling down. So I would say normally at least 5 to 10 minutes for a warm up and a cool down. But that doesn't necessarily mean you always need to do your intervals right in the middle. It is though, I mean, to be completely honest there, if you do like a long endurance ride and you do like the intense part right at the end or right at the start, there is a difference of training effect, of course. However, for most of us, that's not like the biggest concern. I mean, it's more about doing your intervals than those little details there, but you don't necessarily always have to do them right in the middle. Just make sure you have a warm up and a cool down.
Yeah, that's very true.
Cool.
Maybe you can take up the next one from Christopher. The next question.
Hi there. I'm also a Whoop user. Well, I'm actually going to read it from my phone if you don't mind. Hi there, I'm also a Whoop user. My question is, how can I use a Whoop in your training plan so that I have more intense workouts on green days? Yeah, that's actually a great question. Because currently there isn't like an integration that we know that Whoop is setting you up with a green day so that the recovery score is really high. I've used Whoop many times before. I really like the device. I like the dashboarding of it. What I don't like is that it doesn't interact with any kind of training plans. It might interact with a coach, with a human being, but that's of course something completely different than what we offer in Join. And his question is really relevant because what you actually want is that your recovery scores or HRV scores are taken into account in a training plan. And currently, that's not the case. But in this case, I would like to say that Christopher just has to hold on for a little longer because we are building actually recovery scores and readiness scores in the Join app. And our second phase, that will not be our first iteration, but in the second phase, we will also add like HRV devices like Whoop or Aura Rings or whatever you use. And the idea is then, of course, is to actually use that data in optimizing your training plan. So currently we don't have that option, but in the future we will. And up until then, by the way, it's still possible, of course, because of the flexibility that Join gives you. You could say yourself, like, hey, I'm skipping this workout because my recovery score is really low. And then Join sets you up, it adapts. With some changes in the training plan. So what you could do is like, especially when the recovery score is really low, then just skip whatever Join proposes you, and Join will take it along.
Yeah.
So that's always an option.
I guess that's what makes Join great, in my opinion, because it adapts to all your actions, or if you perhaps fatigued or not or fresh,
Yep,
it will always adapt to what is the next best training session for you.
for sure.
Yes, then here is another question from Chris de Groot.
Yep, it's in Dutch though.
Yeah,
You,
it's in Dutch. I will read. I do understand what he's asking. He has two questions where how do we combine join with triathlon, and then what goal, and then how many hours should he set his training plan for? It is possible to train for a triathlon in join. In my opinion, the best program to follow around 3 to 4 months before your triathlon is the time trial training plan. And then you set, let's say you're doing a full Ironman, it's around 180 kilometers. You set that in the training plan, and then Join will build you up, plan your training sessions for your cycling events up until your triathlon. On your hours, I would say you should try replicate some longer sessions for like 100 or 120 kilometer ride, so roughly 4 hours, or perhaps a little bit shorter if you're on your TT bike, to try get those longer training sessions in. And it's important to note that you should only set your availability in joint for your cycling activities. And then you also load your running sessions and your swimming sessions into join, and report your feedback on them with your RPE. And then this could be used to determine if you are potentially overtraining at some point.
yeah, in that regard, it works really well.
Your cycling sessions will be priority.
Yeah. Well, and that's really important to note, right? That I mean, it doesn't set you up with any running activities or swimming activities. So that that information or those kind of workouts need to come from some other place. But Join will take those activities into account and tells you whether you're overtraining or not, whether actually your training load increase over time has the steepness that you actually want, that you will improve, and that you're not overtraining and also not undertraining.
Yeah.
That works really well. I must say, I mean, in terms of hours, I find that a really difficult one, because that's also really dependent on, what's your training history. I mean, if you're currently on a training load of, I don't know, 6 hours a week, then for a whole triathlon, you might increase that to up and about 12 to 15 hours a week. But it takes time to get there. I mean, your body is not that strong yet to cope with those amount of hours and to get better from it. So,
and especially if it's your first triathlon, then your body needs to get used to the extra training load. Because with triathletes, their like CTL scores, their chronic training load scores are very, very high.
Exactly.
I think it would be you correct me if I'm wrong, but it's higher than most like world tour cyclists.
It is, because you're combining multiple sports and therefore also multiple muscle groups. So the total training load that accumulates in chronic training load can be a bit higher. Because it's a combination of all those three sports. So therefore the CTL can be, what you achieve can be higher, and even higher than World Tour Pros. But then again, that shouldn't be a goal on itself. The goal should be, hey, I want to keep increasing my training load and my CTL over time in a steady pace. Not overdo it, and also not undertraining.
Yeah. I see Chris added another question about 2 lines down, where he says he finds it really hard to do 5 minutes 4 times, like VO2 Max sessions. You could just confirm the question with me, but I believe he's referring to that it's really hard to do 5 VO2 Max intervals 4 times at the same quality, or that's what I would assume what he means by his question.
That's what you assume, because I think we both have the same opinion about that. I mean, a workout like this is kind of it's one of the hardest there is. I mean, in total, you're like 20 minutes on VO2 max effort. That's roughly around the maximum. If you do, for example, 13, 15 Ronestad intervals, it accumulates to like 90 minutes and a bit that you are on a VO2 max level. So yes, that is really hard. And actually, the reason why you do like micro intervals, or why also Join gives you micro intervals, is because it's a little easier if you break it down in smaller pieces to do a lot of that quality, around 20 minutes on a VO2 max intensity. So doing that in like big blocks of 5 minutes, that's really difficult.
Yeah.
So you shouldn't do workouts like this too often, but then again, not doing that them at all is also not really a good thing, because you would like to pace yourself for also longer periods, like 5 minutes on that intensity level. And that's also what he's saying, especially on the flats. It's pretty difficult to keep your pace like above functional threshold power and keep it steady. A lot of people perceive that as quite difficult. And to be honest, that's a matter of experience as well, of doing it more often. And eventually, like if your FTP is, for example, at 300 watts and you're aiming at 330, eventually you will notice, like without starting too hard in the beginning of the interval, that you can keep it steady also above FTP, and that it's not constantly fluctuating. And that all the power numbers are all over the place.
Maybe a tip from my side is to maybe try and not do the first interval at, for example, if your FTP is 300 at 350 watts, maybe be like slightly more reasonable and set a 320 watt goal, and then try to do that for 3 times, and then next week you try to do 330 if you are feeling good, and then in that way you build yourself up and not really burn yourself in the first interval because you went just over the limit.
For sure. And the more steady of a resistance you're riding against, the easier it gets. So slightly uphill, which is nearly impossible. Well, which is possible in Limburg, in the southern part of the Netherlands, but the rest of the Netherlands that's not possible. And also like a really strong headwind, that helps.
For sure. Yeah.
So that could also be a possibility.
And then the next question from Richard Webbers. Is there a language option in Join? We love English instead of Dutch. I mean, we cover most and all languages in some form and ways, but how Join works is the app itself is based on the settings of your phone. So if your phone settings, for example, is in Dutch or English or Spanish or whatever it may be, your Join app will be in that language.
Yeah, in default, but you can change it. If you go to like for an iPhone, if you go into the menu, then there's a list of apps, and you can go to the Join app and then set specifically the Join app, for example, to English, and the rest of your phone just remains in Dutch. So that is actually possible. Yeah, I'm not sure how it works on Android, to be honest. I guess similar.
Yes, I'm not too familiar on Android myself with that specific setting. Yes, on to the next question. Maybe you can handle it, Jim, if you want, from Emlyn Allright.
Thanks for the FAQ. What type of efforts and events is a big VO2 max most useful for? Can I use Join to target VO2 max specifically? And what are the best Join programs for VO2 max? Great question, actually. So, first of all, VO2 max is really strong related. So, VO2 max is just the maximum amount of oxygen your body can uptake. And that actually doesn't has a lot to do with like the volume your lungs can uptake. It's more about like the transport capabilities of the oxygen red blood cells in your bloodstream. So it's more about the transport system, and it's about the muscles that need to uptake that oxygen. And a really big VO2 max is often like seen as a high level of talent for like endurance sports like running and cycling. And I know like Garmin puts a big emphasis on VO2 max. We also use the term, of course, in our workout categories. But the thing with VO2 max is it's really strong correlated to your 5-minute maximum power. And that makes it pretty interesting and that's also what you perceive, of course, in the head. That's why that workout category list with VO2 max workouts is named VO2 max, because those efforts are really somewhere between like 1 and 5 or 6 minute efforts that you go all out. And that's actually what you would like to improve with those kind of workouts, that maximum 5-minute efforts. So for what kind of events is that useful? Well, any events in which you would like to go like all out for 5 minutes, maybe also a couple of times. So riding up short hills, really those race efforts kind of like, but not necessarily, for example, doing like long climbs in the Alps, doing a Marmot or those kind of Grand Fondo or cyclo events. Those 5-minute efforts aren't that important. It's way more about like how long can I ride my bike at like 85% of FTP, which is way lower. It's like really that submax level. Then again, if you have a really high VO2 max level, then also like all the intensities below that will also be, connected to that VO2 max. So if you have a high VO2 max, also like your submaximal capabilities are also increased, are also higher. So of course there's a connection between it, but preparing yourself for really long events, then a high VO2 max is not necessarily what you're aiming at.
Yes, and I believe that if you also combine VO2 max sessions with, for example, if FTP intervals of 10-15 minutes longer, the combination or the of the two does help also increasing your FTP ability, and then in that way it increases your overall ability. And it's like you said just now, is your VO2 max session your VO2 max zone is on the top of the pyramid. And then the bigger the pyramid at the bottom, the higher your VO2 max is at the top. So it's important to cover all bases and not just train VO2 max every single day, for example. And good programs, in my opinion, enjoin to focus on your VO2 max is the short climbs program and the criterium training program. Those programs are sorry, how can I put it? Sorry, is a good program with quite a few VO2 max sessions in there, as the focus is on shorter, sharper, harder efforts.
I get what you mean. But so to summarize it a little bit, even if you're preparing for a long endurance event, you still need to do those VO2 max efforts. And what we also see, for example, there are like scientific studies that show now that, especially like there was a comparison in one paper in which they had one group doing like only endurance sessions, and the other group was only doing like in 1/3 of the time only high intensity sessions, and they both increased in the same amount on durability. So on endurance, which is kind of strange because one group didn't do any endurance workouts at all, but they still increased also on their endurance capabilities. So that shows how important VO2 max efforts are. I mean, if you need to choose what, between one or the other, then making sure that at least once a week you do that high intensity work is really important, even if you are preparing yourself for endurance work.
Yes, and then the next question from Ruben. How can you lose excessive muscle mass in a healthy way as I'm a track runner trying to transform into a cyclist? Losing muscle mass versus losing fat is a slightly more complex, how can I say it, science to get right, because your body will always first want to get rid of the fat before it starts burning your muscle mass. And this is honestly something that from me as from support side, I always suggest users go and see a professional in the specific field, because this is something that you need guidance, and you could need to correct guidance to do it in a healthy way and to not really damage yourself in the long run.
Yeah.
As yeah,
Well,
it's something that. Sorry, you
no.
can go ahead.
Well, the thing is here, of course. I mean, there's one really important rule in nature that if you don't lose it, if you don't use it, you're gonna lose it. So if you don't
Yeah,
use those muscles, eventually you will lose it, and you will transform automatically into a cyclist. And I believe that's the healthiest way of doing it. And the question here is actually that, well, I think the question comes from that viewpoint that Ruben tries to lose the muscle mass in a faster way in order to
yeah,
transform faster into a cyclist. And that's something, and I totally agree with you. Yeah, consult like a dietitian, a sports dietitian, to
yeah,
help you with that. And but
yeah.
also ask yourself the question like, why do I want to like speed up this process? Because in a natural way, eventually,
The
um,
body will slow down.
you will get
Yeah,
there. You just need to
it's
train as a cyclist.
yeah, it's a person I thought of now, as you answer the question, is someone like Bradley Wiggins, for example.
Mm-hmm.
He was a really top. He was world class track rider. He had um,
Yeah.
a big amount of muscle on him for an endurance track cyclist, and turning to a Tour de France winner, he
Mm-hmm.
lost over the, I think it was 2 or 3 years. He'd slimmed down to a really skinny rider, and
Yeah.
that was just by doing longer endurance rides, and obviously having a dietitian
Yeah.
on his
Exactly.
side, helping
Yeah.
him during this process. So yes, I think Ruben, try and be patient. Just follow the process. Your body will find its happy medium where with the amount of muscle mass
Mm-hmm.
that you need. I mean, it will, as Jim said, it will lose naturally um, the muscles that you don't use.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe you select the next one, Jim, from
Yeah.
Christopher.
Um, is the FTP plan useful for indoor training? Yes, for sure. I mean, I do believe. I mean, like our plans are never designed like in a way, hey, you need to train these amount of hours, or that there are specific workouts that take longer, like for example, a minimum of 2 hours per day or something. So, because I think that's quite important for indoor training. I mean, I wouldn't advise you to do like 2 or 3 hour indoor sessions. I mean, you can do that
Uh,
occasionally, but also for like your mental well-being, please
yeah,
keep it like
yeah,
at a 1 hour max. And then you might want to do some longer session in the weekend, for example. And yeah, your plan will adjust accordingly. I mean, what is really different in the FTP plan is that it's really focused on the functional threshold, and the workouts that it chooses for that is really aimed at improving that. And you could definitely
yeah,
do some of those workouts indoor. Just don't overdo it with the availability, in my opinion.
yeah. Good. Yes, and then on to the next one from Lisa.
Yep.
I listened to your beta Warden podcast. I'm wondering if beta version that would enable cycle integration and training plan feedback is in the
Yep.
works, and what it would look like.
Well,
maybe this one is a good one for you, Jim.
yeah, so that's something we definitely would like to do in the future. And currently, it's not like anywhere near an integration. Also, not like it's not anywhere in a beta version or something. But yeah, that's really something that we would like to do in the future. But first, like I mentioned before, we are working like on recovery scores and readiness scores. That will be like our first integration, and then yeah, implement cycle would be really good to yeah, to take that into account, whether you get a workout or not, or to yeah, make it just a little bit less intense for some days of the month. So
Yeah.
we are actually in talks with Anne Marijn, with whom we recorded this podcast. So yeah, we will definitely take a look at that.
Yeah, most definitely. I would go on to Anton, and then we'll come back to one of the previous questions, as I would like to combine a few questions that I see in chat into one. So I'll move on to Anton.
Mm-hmm.
I've been meaning to write up a larger mail on the subject of how joints score is calculated. In short, there are no proper boundaries set up for healthy BMI values. I'm 193 centimeters tall and weigh 67 kilograms at one point last year when training with joint. So in short, the joint score is calculated based on different values like FTP, your availability, and or your not necessarily your availability, but the amount of hours you have been training in the last 28 days to 60 days, and then that's a rolling average that rolls over. And then yes, based on what you are training for, let's say your availability is 6 hours during the week, and then it would kind of be your, if you tap on your plan, it would give you a estimation of where your joint score would be progressing to towards the end of your goal. But regarding your question about there's no proper boundary set up for healthy BMI values, I'm not 100% sure what you mean by that.
Yeah,
I'm not
well,
sure
his
if you.
question goes. He pressed entered, enter. So you see, there are like 4 questions, but it's actually one.
Oh, I see. Okay,
And
yeah, that's
yeah. While
yeah,
we're telling this, I was reading it, and in my opinion, Anton has a kind of a wrong idea about joint level, because first of all, joint level, yes, reflects your cycling capabilities, and the fact of the matter is that if you are, let's say, from a theoretical standpoint, 40 kilos with the power numbers that Anton is probably pushing, then you ride up a hill so fast that
yeah,
the Tour de France will definitely give you a call whether you could join next year. And that's what
for
the
sure.
joint level tries to reflect. It's not about punishing anyone, it's about looking at your training data, your power data, and of course also your power data in relation to your weight. And
Yeah,
it doesn't say, for example, like, hey, if you're a pro rider and you're at 49, that especially in the pro peloton, that pro cyclists aren't necessarily the most healthy people in the world, for example. I mean,
yeah.
they
They,
do have
I think
unhealthy BMI
a
values, for
really
sure.
low BMI. Yeah,
But that's not, I mean, joint level doesn't tell you whether you're on the healthy side of BMI values, for example, or yeah, doesn't tell you anything about a diet. It's
yeah,
about matching events with cycling capabilities. That's basically what it does, and matching joint users together, for example. Because if I'm like around level 25 and you're as well, then it's great for us to set up a ride together because we're kind of the same level, and that's what we're trying to do in a joint level. And it's not in any way health advice. So that's really important there. And also, I mean, if power meter data is wrong, or if you enter like wrong, a completely different or wrong weight, accidentally or on purpose, then yeah, if the input is shit, then the output will be as well. I mean,
Yeah.
so
Yeah. And yeah, I would, yes, let's move on to the next one. And then from Robo MN, he's asking, sometimes in a week, close to a rest week, you have little time available to train. I understand that changing the schedule is always less optimal, but what would be most effective in the end? So I just see another ticket of him, or sorry, a question a little bit lower down. And he's continuing, keep the rest week as it is and have another week with fewer training hours than suggested. Or you could add some trainings to the rest week so you have the same time of training in those 2 weeks. Yes, so that's actually a good question, and I do get it often, especially when users are close to a weekend away or like a holiday with the family. So first of all, rest is really important. Join will plan rest weeks for you at the point where you are like have the balance between building your fitness, but also like being slightly fatigued. But it will never allow you to go over a certain barrier of being overtrained. So it will always stop you from overtraining based on your CTL and TSB levels. So that is your training load and your stress levels. So I would not necessarily suggest continuing training during a planned rest week from join. But if it's on some rare occasions, if it's like a day or two that you have to maybe just try and get through this week and then push your recovery week to the next week, that is possible, and you can adjust your availability according to that. So maybe schedule a rest day yourself on a day that will suit you better when your availability is slightly less or more for the week thereafter or before. Yeah, I'm not sure if you have an opinion on that.
Well, what is really important to emphasize here is that join will never give you, if you have like a complete week of rest because you just didn't have the time, then probably you won't get a rest week the week after that, because join only sets you up with a rest week if we think a rest week is like necessary in a way that on the longer term it will improve your performance. So if join sets you up with a rest week, you will need to reach some limits that otherwise that if you don't reach those limits, you will not get a rest week. So if you get scheduled a rest week, that would mean like, okay, you've done enough, please take this rest week to keep improving. So because basically if you are like on a lower availability, or you do less workouts, less hours a week, then you won't get a rest week at all. It's not like that we set rest week every, for example, 5 weeks or 6 weeks. Like a lot of non-flexible, non-adaptive training plans out there do that. And that's not how join works. Join only gives you a rest week if it will improve your performance over time. So on the longer term, of course. But so please take that into account, because I think a lot of people see a rest week as something that join does like on a strict rhythm or something.
What what I quite often see, or I get also the feeling from talking to users in support, is that they feel it's a punishment to rest, and it's actually not at all. It's rest is probably, I think there is like a quote that rest is actually on some days more important than doing an interval session, especially on those days that you feel slightly more fatigued than any other day. Then it's important to rather rest completely. And if you are scheduled maybe 2 or 3 rest days during the week, and you are itching to ride your bike on day 2 or 3 of your rest day, just try to do like a really easy 1 hour training ride. Just spin the legs over and just in that way try to keep yourself active. But I would always advocate for a rest day and taking a complete rest day.
But I do think for a lot of people, sometimes it feels like a punishment, especially because they're used to those fixed programs in which you got a rest week like every 6 weeks, for example. And then if you haven't done enough like in week 4 or 5, then doing a rest week in week 6 feels like a punishment. But if you get a rest week and join, you can make sure of it that you've done enough. Otherwise, you won't get it. So
and
it's really important.
Something that I just reminded myself of is a question that I also get quite often. I think it was earlier in this week, I had a user saying that he's not feeling tired at all. He's like feeling really good. He's feeling good on the bike. He's sleeping enough, etc. But then joined just like then this week is his rest week, and he could not understand why it's his rest week now. And what I explained to him is that when Join plans you a rest week, it doesn't mean you have to feel tired. Resting, you shouldn't rest when you are already tired or already overtrained. So it will plan a rest week for you at the ideal time.
Yep.
Yes, and then a question that I pushed out a little bit, because there's a few, 1 or 2 questions regarding it, is a question from Matthijs de Groot. And it's about commuting. So his question goes, I also commute 30 kilometers 2 times every day. The downside of the scheduling only 1 hour availability every day is your prediction of progression, like in your plan, app is not correct. So it's like it would, for example, just a user just finished a big goal. Their joint score is around 20 or 30. It's on the higher side because you just peaked. And now you set your availability again for your normal training schedule, which would be twice a week, 1 hour, and some users even go 4 times a week, 1 hour. Then you would quite often see that your joint score would slightly trend downwards over the next maybe 3 months or so of your training program. And I see a few users asking or experiencing the same thing. And I think, what is your opinion on that? Because that would not that, in my opinion, it doesn't mean they are actually getting worse. That's not what's happening.
But that's more like, okay, you've done a lot to train towards a certain event, and then you've done it, you completed your goal, and then you're just gonna train on a little lower training volume load, and your level gets down a bit, right? And your progression also gets down. I mean, in the end, if you're on a really high level, and the higher the level gets, the tougher it gets to maintain, to sustain that level. I mean, that's just a fact of life. But also in this case, with this question, I do believe, like, what we always advise with the commuting is that we say, like, okay, set your availability to like the one-way trip. So you just add the other one as just an endurance ride, and for the 1 hour or the 1 hour and 15 minutes you do the intervals. And if you do that, of course, for every week, then you might miss in the prediction of progression like 3 or 4 hours a week that you actually know you're about to do, like on an endurance pace, but Join doesn't take that into account in the progression prediction. And that's actually a pretty interesting one that we haven't looked at up until now. Because our advice is, okay, you just lower the availability, but in that sense, the prediction of progression doesn't really work anymore. So it's actually a pretty valid point that we might need to take a look at this, like, shouldn't we approach the whole commuting thing a little bit differently in the Join app?
Yeah, and I think it's something that falls in line with a future thing that we are working on currently towards our roadmap is having multiple goals. And that could potentially fill that gap in some way to be able to schedule these these sessions
Yeah,
as like almost double training sessions. But with your, just to answer the rest of your question and some other questions down in the chat, is that although your like the future of or the prediction of your joint score is going slightly downwards, that doesn't mean your joint score is actually going down, because if you add your availability after every training session, your joint score will update
of
on
course.
that day.
Yeah,
And then it will, let's say for example, it's currently 20, but over 3 months it predicts it to be 15. But you are training your training sessions and you're doing your 2 hourly sessions on your commuting days, it will go up to 21 or 22 as you train in your so it's just your prediction that is trending downwards. But that is definitely something we should look at and see how we can predict those type of things for people that do commute.
yep.
Yeah, and yeah, the next one, I think it's one for you. I tried reading it in Dutch, but I'm not fully understanding it. It's from Ad van Jammelmond. I'm not sure how you pronounce that.
Van
Sorry if I did
Hellemond. Yeah,
mispronounce your name.
yeah. Van Hellemond. Shall I
Van
read
Hellemond.
it out loud?
Yes, please.
So, what's the responsible increase in your joint score TSS per week in the build-up phase, and what can it be for join when it like plans a rest week, and how much can a joint score get back after rest week? Well, if I may, this all depends on at what kind of level or joint score you're already at. This is just what I said before. Like, the higher your level, the more difficult it is to sustain that level. So if it's pretty low, then also during the rest week your joint score won't deteriorates that fast. But if you are on the Laurens ten Dam level of like 49 or something, then within a rest week it goes, it will decreases pretty fast. But still, also for Laurens ten Dam, those rest weeks are really important. So the TSS per week thing is like, TSS per week is really based upon like, okay, how solid is your base? If you're Pogacar, your TSS per week is completely different than that of mine or yours, hopefully.
Yeah, for sure.
Or mine is definitely different than yours. So, yeah, you can't really say that. I mean, that's not the way. Join is a little bit more sophisticated than that. That we could say like, hey, we just plan the same TSS for everyone. That's not how it works.
Yeah, not how it works.
Anyway.
Yes, just go ahead.
Well, we are already 45 minutes in this Q&A, and we might want to leave some questions for like next month, right? I mean, we could talk like hours in answering these questions, and I would love that. I think my wife and my kids wouldn't, though. But
for sure.
I just wanted to add, like, we answered the question of Anton. That would be like the last one about the BMI in relation to the joint score. And he just added like, hey, could you please make the joint score less dependent on weight? Well, that's really not what we're going for, because weight is important in a cycling performance. Unfortunately, I mean, with all the downsides of it, with all the emphasis on weight, I mean, I'm not a big fan of it. But yes, the cycling performance is dependent on weight. But then the other thing that he adds now is like, make sure that BMI that it takes BMI into account. Well, in that regard, we could, but that's definitely not in a join level. But somewhere else in the app, if you enter like a weight and a length that ends up with like unhealthy BMI values, we could like add something of a notification of some kind, like, hey, this is kind of like out of shape, this relationship between weight and length. Not sure yet how that will look like.
But also to just add on that, if let's say you do add BMI into the calculation of your training program or your joint score, And if we would then look at someone like the other from Ruben earlier on in the chat, who has a bigger mass build, like more muscles than majority of, or especially I would assume a lot more muscle than I have, his BMI would potentially show that he's unhealthy.
Yeah, good
where
point.
he is not. He just has more muscle than I think the average person based on his
No, but the thing is,
running background.
So BMI is actually invented because it's really easy to calculate for everyone. What you really would like to take a look at, of course, is like the amount of muscle mass and percentages of fat. But not everyone has like access to those kind of measures. So that's why BMI is invented. And BMI has a lot of flaws. Like you said before, like if you're short and really muscular, you can be really healthy and have a really high BMI. And yeah, that's absolutely no problem. So BMI is definitely not the best measure out there for being healthy or unhealthy or whatever.
And maybe a question we can finish off with that's kind
but
of
that
related
will be the last
to
one.
what we are talking about now, and it's referring back to a previous question of how the joint score is calculated, where Dan is asking, wondered whether there's a relationship between joint level and FTP. Can anything meaningful be said about that? So FTP plays a very, very big role in the calculation of your joint score, because I mean, that is one of the biggest and most accurate ways of measuring performance. So it definitely does play a role on how we calculate your joint score. So it's based on your training load over the last few months, and your current training load with your FTP, and then if you for example adjust your FTP, or you are getting better over the next couple of months, your joint score would also increase together with your FTP. And you could also see your estimated FTP in the joint app, and you would quite often see that also improving together with your joint score. I'm not sure if there's something you would like to add a bit more on the scientific side of it, Jim.
No, I think you have explained it pretty well. That's basically what the joint level does. The relation between joint level and FTP is pretty large. That's because FTP is strongly correlated to cycling performances. Not necessarily always like the really long ones, but what joint level tries to do is that it's like one number that fits like all types of cyclists that are training for all types of goals. And of course, that means that there is some generalization there, because it's only one number. And on the other end, it's really easy to compare it with events with other cyclists, and that's what it's designed for.
And that, I think just maybe something that we can finish off with is to just touch base on indoor riding, and especially during the winter months. I mean, how to plan for that within the Join app, and maybe tips here and there on how to use the workout player within our app. I mean, for me, for example, we just came out of winter now, and here and there was like really bad cold days where like you would opt rather for the indoor trainer. And I'm sure where with you guys also now going into winter, that's definitely something I'm sure you yourself would be doing quite often now, coming into the next few months.
For sure, yeah. I mean, I've done an indoor workout on the Join workout player this morning. Actually, it was a pretty intense one. And I mean, the way that we designed the Join indoor player is that it works like really fast. I believe there's not another platform in which you can be faster doing your indoor workout. You just press on the workout in the app. You press start workout, it counts down, it automatically detects all your devices, it counts down, and you're away. It's definitely also not the most engaging way of doing it. So I could also see that you combine like Swift or other platforms with Join to also do, for example, those races or to be really out and about in those virtual worlds.
Yeah.
But then again, if you're looking on a really easy and efficient way of doing your workout indoors, then we got a solution for you. And maybe for the next one, I mean, because we are really getting out of the summer period now, maybe in a November edition, we can dive a little bit more into indoor.
For sure.
And also look at like hydration, what kind of nutrition, for example, types of trainers, you name it. Shortening workouts, that could be cool.
Yeah, like almost a bit of tricks of the trade on how to kind of get it done in the correct way. I mean, I think that's our goal with Join, is to try to keep things simple but yet effective, and I think that's what we've accomplished with the workout player. It's simple in many ways, but it's very, very effective at getting the job done.
Yep. All
And
right, but
yes,
before you take another question,
for anyone,
Rohan, wait 1 sec. Before you take another question, we should finish up because we keep this Q&A for 45 minutes. And what we're gonna do, what we did with the previous editions as well, is that we're gonna chapter all the questions that we had, and that it's really easy to search for whatever answer you're looking for. And we want to save some questions also for the next edition in November. So that will be roughly in 4 weeks from now. I want to thank you for your time and
thank you.
And all your answers. I think it was great. So we promised just now that next edition we'll be diving more into indoor. So that will be kind of like a mindfuck for you because you're like in the middle of summer almost. Talking about indoor
every day.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. But no, thanks for all the viewers.
Thank you.
We'll be back in 4 weeks from now, and take care.
Yes, and please, if there's anyone in the live or in the chat that feels their question was not fully answered or they have another question, please don't hesitate sending me an email at support. I see Anton already said he will send me the long email, and I would happily read through it and understand what point he's trying to make. And the same goes for anyone else. If you're hesitant about asking a question on the live or anything, please just send us an email at support, and I'll get back to you.
Yes, from within the app, it's really easy to connect to support. And we will get that question right. So once again, thanks for your time. Thanks for watching this, and we'll be back in about 4 weeks from now. Take care and have a nice weekend.
Have a good weekend,
Yo.